my real parents died in a car accident 30 years ago. I was 1.5 years old at the time, in a car seat, and miraculously survived. Because both of my parents were raised in orphanages and had no relatives. I was adopted by a couple who were unable to have their own children. They were gentle and loving and took care of me as if I were their own child. They raised me in a family with a steady income, and I was able to attend college as a result. From now on, I will earn money and do my best so that you two can spend your retirement happily. After landing a job at an industry-leading venture firm, I thought it was time to repay my parents. I started to work with a renewed spirit. I moved out of my parents' house when I entered college and lived alone. My parents were always concerned about me, so in addition to good morning and good night, I texted them after I left and got home, which was awkward to say to my friends. But I was living a fulfilling life. Work was rewarding and going well, and I was enjoying working on the same project as the company's young and dynamic CEO. Even my parents were initially anxious about my career in a field they had never heard of. Observing my success in comparison to my friends of the same generation, my parents seemed to finally believe in what I was doing. A few years passed, and when I turned 30, my dad, who had spent his entire life on the cutting edge, suffered a stroke and was sent to the hospital, where he died without ever regaining consciousness. I regretted that I had not been able to show him any filial piety, and that I had not even had the chance to say a few last words to him. My dad always listened to me with a smile, and even when my mom was sometimes worried about me, he would say, "It's typical of a boy." Let him do it. My dad was always on my side, supporting me, and I was grateful to him no matter what. My dad's death was more of a shock to my mom, who had been with him for many years. She was so out of it at her husband's funeral that she would have fainted without me by her side, unable to absorb the reality of the situation.
But Mom, instead I'm always by your side and...
She nodded weakly, then her look returned sorrowful and sad. I was worried about leaving her at home alone, but I had a lot of work to do and couldn't return.
Well, San, so why might when I come over to my house for a while? One should be lonely by herself.
I suggested her, but I don't want to leave my house with so many memories of your father. Thank you for worrying about me. I'll be okay. As a result, she stayed at home, and I spent my days focusing on the tasks at hand, despite my concerns for her. Mom would have no issue making ends meet with the inheritance that my dad left her. I thought that time would take care of my mom's depression, though not completely. However, I was mistaken, and my mom's mind had been so affected by my dad's death that she was unable to make rational decisions. I received a call from her one day, but I was in the middle of a business meeting and was unable to answer the phone right away. So I called her back in the evening after work had settled down.
Hey, Mom. I'm sorry for getting back to you late.
I spoke to her as usual, but she seemed to be acting strangely. I wasn't sure if I should tell you about this, but I think I may have been scammed. I was so surprised that I moved to a place where no one could hear our conversation, calmed down, and listened to her. After hearing the details from my mom, I rushed to talk to my boss and immediately went straight from my office to my parents' house. I went to the police station with my mom and spoke with them, but the fraud was pretty clever. I was merely advised that the big sum of money my mom had transferred was extremely unlikely to be returned. Excited tours, it was difficult for me to look at my mom's face, which was so depressed and filled with sorrow that I couldn't even look at her.
It's not your fault, Mom. Scammers are to be blamed for this.
I tried my best to comfort her, but ever since that one incident, she had been in a state of depression. One winter night, her home caught fire due to mismanagement of the stove, and my mom, who had been sleeping, passed away. Within a year, I had lost my parents and our home, and as an orphan, since I had no other siblings or relatives. But even though I was past 30, I was overcome with despair and emptiness, believing that I was genuinely alone in the world. I had no motivation to do the work I loved so much. And the bad things kept happening. The company I worked for, which had seemed to be doing so well, went bankrupt. I thought my life was over, and all I could do was laugh. All of my dad's inheritance was lost because my mom was scammed, and part had to be used to rebuild a neighbor's house that had been damaged in a fire. This with only a suitcase. Action I feels I moved out of the flat with my meager severance pay and savings and into a cheap shared house in San Francisco. As at my age, there was plenty of full-time employment available, and the CEO of the company I used to work for offered to refer me to his friend's company. But I was so depressed by the loss that I didn't want to do anything, and I was halfway to the point where I didn't care what happened to my life. I was so engrossed in negative thinking that I thought my true parents and the parents who had nurtured me so well would have died as a result of my connection with them. I had no idea what the meaning of life was. My little savings vanished so quickly that I didn't even have enough money to cover the cost of the shared house. Except we and RMEST, I had no choice but to live on the streets and get a day job just to make ends meet. As the youngest homeless person in the area, I was often offered jobs at construction sites. It was a job I'd never done before, but it wasn't too bad as long as I didn't care what other people thought of me. One of my colleagues was very kind to me. I got this at sales for 50 cents. Come on, Eden. And he would give me pizza. Thank you very much. I was more pleased by his kindness than by the price, and I made a small chat with him while I enjoyed the pizza. It made me happy that day, and after work, I had a shower at a support facility. After that, I took a nice stroll along the river to my house after nightfall. That weekend, I saw a boy of elementary school age crouching alone near the river. I was somewhat concerned, so I quickly approached him and called out to him.
Hey, are you alright? What are you doing here all alone?
At the week, sir, when he noticed me, he appeared surprised for a while before becoming without emotion and staring into the distance.
Hey, it's gonna be dark soon. If you don't go home soon, the people at home will worry. How close is your home from here?
I squatted down, made eye contact with the boy, and slowly spoke to him. The boy glanced at me and said quietly, "I had a fight. I ran away from home and walked all the way here, but I got lost." Apparently, the boy had a fight with his family and ran out of the house in a hurry, but he really got lost.
I said, do you know where you live? If so, I can take you there.
The boy looked at me and said, "Mister, you are not a bad person, are you? If that's the case, I'm not going with you." I found his cheeky way of saying it rather cute and burst out laughing.
What are you talking about? What a terrible thing to say. Well, if I look like this, I'm sure I look suspicious.
When I said that, the boy chuckled and looked at me.
You don't seem like a bad guy. Will you promise to take me home?
"Sure, if you give me your address, I'll take you there." The boy's name was Andrew, and Andrew gave me his address without hesitation. It was quite a distance from where we were.
You must have walked a long distance. I'm sure your legs are tired.
Don't worry. I'm used to it, playing soccer.
The sun was about to set, so we hurried. We walked pleasantly with Andrew, talking about soccer, to his house, which was about 30 minutes away.
Oh, this is it. This is where I live.
I stopped and gasped at the sound of Andrew's voice. It was neither an apartment nor a house, but an orphanage.
Are you trying to tell me that your home is...
I'm sure you are surprised. Also, Mom and Dad died in an accident a year ago. I have no other relatives, so they told me to live here. And this is my home now.
I was dumbfounded with inexplicable thoughts as I saw Andrew chatting so cheerfully. "I see, so you don't have parents either." Actually, my parents died in an accident too. Oh, I was lucky enough to be adopted by a very sweet couple, for which I am very grateful. But they both died last year. My only regret is that I couldn't pay them back. Andrew got excited when I mentioned my parents and began to ask questions.
What's it like to have a new mom and dad?
Well, I was only about 1.5 years old at the time, so I didn't really remember my real parents. At things, I considered those who raised me to be my true parents, and I took them for granted.
I see, then maybe I should eat too. You know, I say tired when I wake because I was called to my teacher's room in the morning. I heard that there was a couple who wanted to adopt me. I still haven't forgotten my mom and dad, and I've decided that I will never forget them. That's why I'm afraid to meet them.
I was a baby when my foster parents took me in, so I didn't have that kind of conflict between my real parents and my new parents. So, I admired Andrew for being able to think about his biological parents like that. You are a nice kid, so that's why you ran away suddenly. Why don't you tell your teacher about it? He must be a good person to you, right? Andrew grinned and nodded.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. If I tell him what we just talked about, I wonder if he will understand my feelings as well as you did.
I'm sure he will. Even I, who just met you, could understand how you feel.
I'm sure he will. Even I, who just met you, could understand how you feel. You will understand. I'm sure your teacher, who sees you every day, will understand.
I see. So, I got it. Apologize to him and tell him how I feel.
Andrew said with a brighter expression than the first time I met him.
Thank you. Mr. Oh, you just hanging the two.
With a smile on his face. Andrew passed through the gate and went back inside the facility. I kept smiling and waving until Andrew was out of sight. I was reflecting on his final words to me. Hang in there. I wished Andrew a bright future, but I knew I had to work hard like him too. And for the sake of my parents, who had sent me to college. I was determined not to remain homeless. The next day, I put on a suit and started looking for a job. But in between day jobs, I searched everywhere for a job that would allow me to make use of my previous career. But I didn't have an address to put on my resume, and I kept getting rejected on paperwork. A friendly colleague at the building site, who occasionally brought me pizza, said, "You can stay with us until you get a job. We are a father-son family, and my son just got a job and moved out. So I've got a spare room. I can't let you live there forever, but if you're serious about finding a job, I'll help you out. Really. Thank you very much." I thanked him sincerely and decided to accept his generous offer. A month later, I was hired by a company with better conditions than I had hoped for. I stayed at my colleague's house until my first paycheck came in. What a pity. I'm going to miss you. Let's have a drink together sometime. Of course. I'll buy you a drink then. 2 months later, I left my colleague's house, who had become my drinking buddy. I started a new life in a small old apartment. It was because of my encounter with Andrew that I was able to come back. I'd always wanted to thank him once my life became stable. I took the plunge and visited the facility where Andrew lived on my weekday off. I had not seen Andrew since that day, but his words and smile remained in my mind. I stood in front of the gate and rang the intercom.
Yes, can I help you?
Hello. Actually, I told over the intercom who I was and my relationship with Andrew.
You must be the Alicia that Andrew was talking about.
Answer, apparently. The person who answered the door was the head of the facility, whom Andrew said was his favorite teacher. He came out the gate and talked about Andrew.
A little while after that, Andrew was adopted. As he is now living with a couple in a neighboring town. Apparently, Andrew had an interview with the couple, and after that, he was now living happily as a member of their family.
Please wait a moment. I'll contact his new house right now. I'm sure Andrew would love to talk to you. Being persuaded by his kind smile, I talked with Andrew on the phone for the first time in months. Andrew, I'm so happy for you. That's when I brought it up. Andrew reacted as cocky as ever.
I'm happy for you too, mister. You must have worked hard too. He responded to me cheerfully.
When I heard his voice, I got the happy sensation that Andrew had overcome his difficulties and was living happily with his new family. At the same time, I wondered how a little encounter with someone could enrich my life so much. And I was also filled with optimism for my own future.